Hi there, folks. This is Tom back with a supplemental piece of the Heavily Biased Top 10. I'm going to do a quick little bit here on Rivalry Week. I promised that we would get a primer out early and that we would get a little bit of the blind rankings in here. So we're going to get a little bit of a ranking reaction and a Rivalry Week primer, some blind resumes, and talk a little bit about just kind of the overall thoughts as we head into the last couple of weeks of season. Um, we do have a couple little things to look at with the rankings. They did come out tonight. If you look back a couple of days to the Week 13 recap, you will see that I did put a prediction for the CFP rankings there. And down to a couple of teams, I had this pretty much nailed. I predicted stability in the top five. We got exactly that with Ohio State number one, Indiana two, Texas A&M three, Georgia four, Texas Tech five. I also predicted the shift of Oregon and Ole Miss. So Oregon to six, Ole Miss to seven. I had in my prediction Notre Dame at eight, Oklahoma nine, Alabama 10. I was pleased to see that Oklahoma stayed at that eight spot and ahead of Notre Dame. Alabama coming in at 10 puts them in right now the last spot that is available for an at-large among the field. BYU at 11, Miami at 11, BYU at 12, Utah at 13. Miami is being used as the placeholder for an ACC champion. But as we have discussed in the recap, it is kind of a long shot for them to make it to the ACC championship game. BYU controls their own destiny for getting to the Big 12 championship game, and then Utah, who is not able to make that game, is sitting there in the 13th spot. No, I guess there are some possibilities. The ACC leaders right now, these are the three teams that can make the ACC championship game, and they are Virginia, SMU, and Pitt. All three of those, there are four ACC teams that are ranked, Miami being the highest by a long shot at 11, with Virginia at 18, SMU at 21 being the favorites to make the ACC championship game, and then Pitt at 22. The highest G5 is in the pool, or in the poll, and that is 24th for Tulane. I wasn't surprised by the top seven. It's exactly what I picked, or exactly what I predicted. I still am not quite that high on Oregon, though they did finally get a win that is kind of worthy of their ranking. And they have had a tighter last few weeks than some of the other teams here in this list. I still don't believe in Indiana, and I am not at all high on the record that Notre Dame has put on the field. You know, we've seen some committees be very focused on head-to-head games. We've seen some committees be very focused on how you're looking on the field, on several metrics off or several metrics on the field. Nothing really off it, but with this one, they seem a lot more focused on kind of eye test, and I'm not a fan of that on a week-to-week basis, as we do see several things that just don't kind of align. Let's talk about the primer here, and then we'll dive into a little bit more about these games. Because this is Thanksgiving week, you're getting the primer a little bit early, and you're getting the primer a little bit early because we are going to see some of these games kick off on Friday. So at noon on Friday, I'll still be at work while Ole Miss and Mississippi State kick off in the Egg Bowl. The kind of questions for this game are, will Ole Miss secure a playoff spot? And then what's going to happen with Kiffin? The athletic director over at Ole Miss has said that there will be an announcement after this game. I'm really curious to see where that goes. I am kind of firmly of the opinion that having seen Kiffin as a head coach in a couple of different places, as an assistant at Alabama, and then again out as a head coach, now in two more spots that follow that. This is really kind of the most stable and best that I've seen him look. Even being an assistant at Alabama, where I loved seeing him on the sideline, still very mercurial individual. Um, but at Ole Miss, he seems to be in a great spot and quite healthy. And for his sake, I do hope that that's kind of where he stays. Though the offers on the table might be too big. It does kind of beg the question: what is it you're chasing? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for championships? Are you looking for contender? I think you've built that in Oxford, and I'm not certain that you get a better shake at it at Florida. I'm sure you don't get a better shake at it at LSU. That is a weird, wild place to be. The midday window, Georgia versus Georgia Tech is the big one here. And the reasoning well, that's kind of a big one here is number one, it is an out of conference game for both. It's a nice reference point for two teams that are up high in the ACC and SEC. Georgia is probably going to lock in a bye with a win. Georgia runs to an 11-1 record. I think they're going to get a bye basically no matter what else they do. Georgia could wind up seeing this as kind of a preview for their next game location because the SEC championship game will also be played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where this game is being played. Um, they're going to probably sit in the locker room and watch and see what happens with Texas A&M because the last game of the night that has any major consequence there on Friday will be the late game Texas A&M traveling to play Texas. Um, Texas A&M is likely, because of their schedule, to miss the SEC championship game with a loss. A loss would put them, Ole Miss would have already played, and if Ole Miss wins and Georgia has already finished their SEC slate, if it winds up being in a situation where those three are tied at the end of the day, granted there's still another domino to fall the next day, but if those three are tied at the end of the day, that means Texas A&M lost and is behind when it comes to SEC tiebreakers. Um, so, and if that happens, I mean, granted, they're losing. If that happens, they would be losing to a very good Texas team. So, how far does that bring them down? How much of a statement does that make for Texas? I still feel that it is quite likely, given the volume of 9-2 teams right now who could make it to 10-2. Uh, I still I still don't think this is going to be the year that you see a natural 9-3 make the field. It's coming. It's going to happen, but this year might not be the year. And a pretty good Texas team is going to be probably the first 9-3 out when it comes to it at the end of the season, if they beat Texas A&M. All right, Saturday. Couple of big ones start the day on Saturday. Ohio State at Michigan obviously is a big game as far as a big rivalry. It is, in my opinion, one of the more major rivalries to watch. Uh, Real streaky of late. Uh, but one of the big parts of that streak right now is that even with the success of Ohio State, they have lost four in a row in that game. And so would be looking to kind of make that shift, see if they can continue their undefeated season. As I have said before, it's an interesting call to make because I do still think that Ohio State, much like Georgia, would hold on to a bye at 11-1. I think they have done enough to secure that. But because of their conference schedule, they also would be unlikely to make the Big Ten championship game. They would have a Michigan team that is similarly 8-1 in conference, that has the head-to-head edge, and then you would likely have both Oregon and Indiana, who have some other tie-breaking advantages possible, even if Indiana were to lose their game. Um, and so it's one of those where getting them in at a 8-1 in conference, getting Ohio State in at 8-1 in conference would be quite difficult. Um, but they'd likely get a bye anyway. And so it becomes that question of, if people are banged up at all, do you pull back? If the game starts out not in your favor, do you pull back and rest your starters and say, well, we're going to punt on this one and see what happens in the playoff field? Because if your goal is to win a Big Ten championship, you're playing this all out. If your goal is to win a national championship, now we start to see if you play it conservatively. Miami at Pitt is the other game in the noon window. Miami is looking to build on a resume. As we said, they are sitting at number 11 right now. There are several other teams that are 9-2, looking to be 10-2, that are out ahead of them. We'll look a little bit more about that in a minute. Miami is the least likely of the four teams that are alive to make the ACC championship game. Pitt with a win doesn't secure themselves a spot in the ACC championship game. It's SMU and Virginia that can actually control their own destiny. But the winner of this one kind of waits and see what happens in the night games, because those two games are later on in the evening. They're not that important. They're not rivalry games. They're not big things that are going on. Neither is this one, Miami and Pitt, not the big rivalry that you think of. But an interesting matchup nonetheless. The midday rivalry games that I'm not interested in. Not a lot of them have CFP impact. You do have some good ones. You do have Oklahoma LSU. You do have Vanderbilt versus Tennessee. You've got a few other things that are out there that are good rivalry games. But it's finally my break because I'll probably have watched, 5 windows of games or 4 windows of games back to back. And the late one's coming. The last game of the day, last game slot of the day, again, yeah, there's games that start 10, 11 p.m. Eastern time. I'm not going to be around for that. Alabama at Auburn kicks off in that primetime window. Alabama is winning in for the SEC championship. They are in a position where there's about 4 or 5 different ways that they can make it to the SEC championship. All of them start with win this game. Auburn with a win would be bowl eligible and would do a lot of things that they really would love to do in a season that has not gone their way. They would be bowl eligible. They would keep Alabama out of both the SEC championship and the college football playoff, and would keep them from winning another in a row. Jordan Hare at night, gosh, that is a cursed place to be. But we'll see what happens. All right, let's do some blind resumes. I've talked about this a little bit. I posted a couple on the page, and I want to go ahead and put some of these in the slide form. So if you are watching this or if you're listening to this as a podcast, know that I have put some slides behind this on the YouTube page. Very easy to get to. I'll put a link in the show notes. Blind resumes. What these are is that I have taken the names out of the picture and have gone based purely on records. And so we'll look at each of these a little bit and ask you to kind of think about, where would you rank teams, just the ones that are on this slide, with respect to one another. And then we'll talk about kind of who they are back at the end of this. So page 1, Team A, their opponent's record is 64-57. The Power 4 opponents of Team A are 60-50. They have 1 current top 25 win. They have 2 current top 25 losses. They have the record of the Power 4 opponents that they have defeated is slightly under 500 at 454. Team B, their opponent's record is the same, 64-57. However, that is weighted a little bit more towards their non-Power 4, because their Power 4 opponents are 56-54, still slightly above 500. They have 1 current top 25 win. They have 1 current top 25 loss. Team B's defeated Power 4 opponents are slightly behind at 0.429. Figure out your answer. Which of these do you think you would rank above the other one? I left this one as a little bit easier, though we can kind of look at the merits of each. Their strength of schedule is very similar. The strength of their Power 4 opponents is within a few games of one another. Both of them do have a current top 25 win. The better losses are with Team A, and they have a slightly better record among their Power 4 opponents, the teams that they have beaten. For me, probably Team A over Team B when we're looking at rankings. We'll talk a few more, then I'll show you who they are. Page 2. 3 teams this time. Team A, Power 4 victory percentage. This is the winning percentage of Power 4 teams that you have beaten is 39%, 0.390. The total schedule record for Team A on page 2 is 69-62. They have no shot at a conference title game. Team B, Power 4 victory percentage is 636. Their total schedule record is 71-50, and they can play their way to a conference title. Team C, their Power 4 victory percentage is 545. They have a same total record schedule of 71-50, and they can also play to a conference title. Very, very similar total schedule records. As there's not that much difference here, do note that one of these did not play because I never include FCS teams. One of these must not have played one, which about 1 in 9 teams don't play an FCS game. Because if you're looking at this and you're figuring out that math real quick, you've realized that you've got 131 games represented for Team A, and you only have 121 represented for Teams B and C. That's enough to tell me who they are, but I've also put this together myself. Either way, we'll note that there's not a huge gap in there as far as the win totals go. There's a lot more losses on the side of Team A's opponents. B and C, same total schedule record. The difference between B and C here is that Power 4 victory percentage. More of Team C's schedule strength came outside of the Power 4 than what came inside of the Power 4. So although they have pretty similar records overall, or their opponents have similar records overall, more strength of schedule in Team B. B and C can both play for a shot at their conference title. A doesn't have any probability of that, and my goodness, that total schedule record doesn't help when your Power 4 victory percentage is that low. For me here on this slide, this is BCA, and pretty easy. Last one, blind resumes, page 3. Team A schedule record 68-53. Power 4 victory percentage is 571. They have a top 10 win. Team B schedule record 61-60. They have a Power 4 victory percentage of 489, and they also have a top 10 win. Team C schedule record of 75-45. They have a Power 4 victory percentage of 631, and they have a top 10 win. 3 pretty different looks here. The schedule record for Team B is the lowest of the group. They have the lowest Power 4 victory percentage of the group. They do have a good win. So all 3 of these share that top 10 win among them. Team A, better schedule record. Victory percentage is significantly above 500. But then Team C, this is actually the best schedule record out of all of the group that are currently in the top 13. This is also one of the better Power Four representations out of it, and a top 10 win to boot. So they are in the same kind of standing with the rest of these. Let's talk about who these are. In the first slide, you probably ranked Utah above Miami, because Team A here was Utah, Team B is Miami. You're talking about two teams that are right there with one another. Miami in a position where they are the placeholder for the ACC, Utah in a position where they are very locked behind Texas Tech and BYU, and in a position where they are unlikely to see that conference gain a third spot. However, on resume, Utah's ahead. And there are places where I think that Miami is well ahead of teams like Notre Dame. Um, on the second slide, you probably ranked BCA, and that would have put you ranking Alabama, then BYU, then Notre Dame. I think the common theme here is that there's a lot of teams that are out there that when you build out the resume and you put things together, the pretender here is Notre Dame. And that's just the bottom line. Team A in the third slide is Georgia. Team B is Indiana. And Team C is Oklahoma. All three of them have a top 10 win. All three of them have a decent schedule. Oklahoma's is the toughest of the group, and they have beaten the toughest teams of the group, though their win is not quite as highly ranked as Georgia's. And somehow Indiana's is slightly above Georgia's as well. If you're looking for the big dog, he is right here. All right. Last thing we'll do with this one, and then we'll let you go for the evening. Let's take the blinders off. Of the top 13 teams, the worst record among all Power 4 opponents belongs to Notre Dame. And that the disparity when you look at it as far as Power 4 victories becomes magnified because they have the worst Power 4 schedule, and the two teams that they lost to are the two best records on that schedule at 9-2 Miami and 11-0 Texas A&M. So when we really break it down and we try to put them on merit, this is a team that has played the bottom two teams in the ACC. They have played the bottom team in the SEC. They have played the bottom team in the Big Ten. They played the second from bottom team in the ACC. The last place team in the ACC was in a one-score game, driving to tie it in the fourth quarter. And so if you think that I'm impressed by you putting up 70 points against Syracuse, I'm not. Because Boston College played you just as tough as everybody else could have. And that's statistically one of the bottom four teams in the Power Four, and hung right there with you. So don't come at me talking about what you did to Syracuse. Texas A&M has played a better schedule than Indiana. They have been pushed through more of their competition. Only 3 of Indiana's Power 4 opponents have a winning record. How Indiana is holding on to the number 2 spot above Texas A&M is egregious, just to say the least. Texas A&M has played stronger games down the stretch. They have played stronger teams down the stretch. Indiana has not played against an opponent with a record north of 500 since October 10th. They won't play a team with a record north of 500 until December 6th. So when you talk about that kind of stretch on the schedule and you try and figure out where things are, this is not a team that should be ranked second, period. You know, when we start looking at them and we rank them against the merits of some of the one-loss teams, and we talk about where they are versus Georgia, they were behind. When we put them against the merits of a two-loss team against Oklahoma, they are behind. Um, I It's a 12-team playoff. It will probably expand to 14 fairly soon. It'll probably expand to 16 at some point. I don't doubt either of those things are coming. Um, with that being the case, being undefeated helps, but that's not the only thing out there. And the messaging that competitive committee and that the playoff committees need to send and need to be sending is that your games matter. In no world should Notre Dame be ranked ahead of Miami. Matter of fact, they shouldn't be ranked ahead of BYU. They shouldn't be ranked ahead of Alabama. All three of those have different and direct merits to be ahead of Notre Dame, period. Alabama has more quality wins, same number of losses. They have a better schedule. They have done much better against the better portions of their competition. They didn't play their way through the last place teams of three leagues. And that's just what these two have put on paper. Miami beat this team on the field. Same record, direct comparison. There shouldn't be a world where Notre Dame is ranked ahead of them, period. BYU, same thing. Here's a one-loss team. Here's a team that has only lost one time, albeit they lost a game that they were not a factor in. Texas Tech, you can BYU, you can say what you want to about how they kind of came back in the no, they didn't. They did not. They put together a fourth quarter score to make what was a 26 nothing game look a little bit nicer. They were not a factor in that game. That's still only one loss. And when you play out the rest of how their record has gone, significantly better than what Notre Dame has put on the field. So in both of these kind of cases, when we talk about taking the blinders off and transparency, I still think that this committee has a lot to answer for why some of these teams are where they are. And, I do hope that with rivalry week playing out and some of these teams making it to and potentially doing well in their conference championship games, that we'll see some of that bumped out of the way. Because when we look at blind resumes, it's real obvious who should be where. And when we put the names back with them, that shouldn't matter. So enjoy rivalry week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. If you're watching this on YouTube, you've got access to the slides to see where things are. If you're listening to this as a podcast, I will leave the YouTube link in the show notes. And take care. We'll see you after rivalry week.